Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please subscribe to this channel, share, like, as well as drop a comment on the comment section. So today, our lecture is titled Diplomatic History. Diplomatic History. Now, the art of diplomacy is as old as the existence of human communities. Sending of emissaries to open negotiation was a common practice among primitive nations. In many cases, their reception and treatment is regulated by international customs. The Greek city-states frequently dispatched and received with accreditation emissaries who present their cases openly before the rulers or assemblies to whom they were sent. By the 15th century, the principle and method of the Greek city-states had developed. As the Middle Age proceeded, the sovereignty of individual states demanded a condition that credentials be required from an ambassador who wants to be received by a sovereign power. At the beginning of the 16th century, the practice of accreditatory diplomatic envoys have started spreading to other countries of Europe in the atmosphere of shifting alliances and dynastic struggles for power. The classical diplomacy was conducted by the members of the ruling class, who had more in common with each other than with majority of their own people. It was conducted according to well-defined rules and conventions. It was then a personal and flexible type of diplomacy. In the post-revolutionary Europe, new objectives arose. Acceptance of an established monarchical order gave way to emphasis on liberty and individual rights. Okay, now the slogan of the French Revolution of 1789, which reverberated through Europe, was liberty, equality, and fraternity. Henceforth, diplomacy was to be conducted not in the interest of a dynasty, but of the nation as a whole. After the First World War, demand grew for open diplomacy that will be accessible for public scrutiny. In the wake of the new emphasis on the sovereignty of the people, the electorate claiming control of the government was to know what agreement was being made with the name. Now, for example, the United States of America refused to participate in the League of Nations in spite of the role played by President Woodrow Wilson. Nowadays, the openness of agreement is guaranteed in principle by the United Nations rule that all agreements concluded by member states must be registered and their text deposited with the Secretary General. The irony is that negotiations conducted under the public eye undermine the process of negotiations. By true nature, negotiation must be confidential. This is the essence of diplomacy. Now, let us look at the phases of diplomatic development now. The phases of diplomatic development. Now, man evolved through the state of nature, which was characteristically primitive, and according to Thomas Hobbes, life then was brutish, short, and nasty. The rule then basically was the survival of the fittest. Shortly after the primitive society came the medieval European system, which manifested at the collapse of Roman Empire. This medieval European system was characterized by a series of internecine ethnic, religious, political, and ideological wars. The medieval period was also, referred to as a dark age, and Europe nearly returned to the imperial womb. In other words, the Roman notion that spiritual and secular power are the same was nearly revived, but for the spread of Islam. Feudalism became, began to predominate, and the manner of loyalty and political obligations began to change, some as the manner of religious obligations. This change of loyalties resulted into a transfer of allegiance from religious to secular authorities and from local to national authorities of government. By the 15th century, the Italian city-state system had developed under clearly secular rulers. Politics to them was not based on religion, but on reason of the state. Savagery that characterized religious wars had reduced, but was not totally eradicated. Necessary war, which is actually the interest of the state, replaced just war, which was actually war for religious justification. Dogmatism was eradicated, and the leaders of the Italian city-states, unashamedly gave room to compromise. In fact, the origin of good diplomatic practice, establishment of embassies, and the attendant privileges could be traced to the Italian city-state system. Okay, so Italian city-states established permanent diplomatic missions, that is embassies, career diplomats, and complete privileges and immunities that go with it. Whereas the Greeks, Egyptians, Assyrians, and the Romans established ad hoc envoys. When diplomacy failed, the Italian rulers resorted to the whole arsenal of threat, bribe, subversion, assassination, and war. Ultimately, these wars would not even be fought between individual citizens, but between mercenaries that are paid. That is what is known as professional soldiering. The wars were not prominently fought to destroy the opponent so as not to stimulate unfavorable reaction or coalition, but to strike a desirable balance in order to cause stability in the state system. In view of this, some scholars have argued that the Italian state practice is the bridge between the medieval and the modern international society and state system. The Treaty of Westphalia, which ended the 30-year war, which engulfed Europe, also gave impetus to modern diplomacy. In fact, some scholars believe that modernity, or at least the modern state system, started in 1648 when the treaty was signed. Though the Westphalia Treaty was not a panacea or did not result in total termination of wars in Europe, it however gave credence to diplomacy. The treaty brought about the idea of establishing permanent diplomatic missions as well as rules of diplomacy, such as the acknowledgement of diplomatic immunities, extraterritoriality of embassies, which means working in an international space which is immune from the laws of the state. Another development of modern diplomacy is the concert system, which was an epoch-making event in European periodic summit or conference system meant to discuss or settle matters bordering on common interest. The concert system started in 1815 when the Napoleonic War nearly imploded the whole of Europe. Furthermore, in the annals of diplomatic history is the peace conference which was convened after the First World War, that is the Versailles Treaty. It also encouraged the notion of self-determination in the modern international system. The League of Nations that was instituted shortly after the war, after the First World War, could not contain the outbreak of the Second World War. This led to the establishment of the United Nations Organization in 1945. Although the UN has been handicapped on several international issues, it has been able to weather the storm and the heat generated by the Cold War power politics. Thank you very much.